It is in progress. So we're here on the council table on September 1st with Ike Ikokwu, and we are going to talk about finances, which I'm still in elementary school with this. That's why we got an expert like Ike on here. But I think all of us are going to school on finances, because one of the things that I've learned about finances from Jesus, and particularly out of Luke, is that it says if you can handle, he called it unrighteous mammon, and I may have some terminology around that, but basically, if we want to just kind of capture it in the term of money, he said, if you can handle this, you can handle the things of the kingdom. And it's always stunned me, because I felt like I've always been at least a good steward, that I never spent money frivolously, as far as I know. That's one of the reasons I asked the question, what crazy thing you've done? Because we all make crazy investments sometimes, with crazy things that we do. But most of them, I suspect, on this call are conscientious and not frivolous with money. But there's something beautiful about that as we just pay attention to it, just like in Jeff's story. I love that, Jeff. Just, you're trusting God for that tithe to give it away. And that's part of the thing that I'm learning to do better, because I often get that one check in and feel like, oh, can I release this back out? And it's a challenge without these kind of encouragements. Yep. So I just want to let you know, I'm in elementary school. Ike is in the graduate school level. And he'll probably kind of glimpse at that a little bit, but I think our experience level and how to handle money and some of the pitfalls and some of the high points are very important to learn from. So just know today, I'm excited to see Ike come on and just share from his heart what's going on with this area, but also from the scriptures. He's a man of the word, and he hears from God really well. And we're all on this journey, but I appreciate you, Ike, coming on today. Ike and I've known each other for a number of years, and have kind of walked with him in some of the low valleys and some of the high places too, and count him as a good friend. So just get your pen out if you want to listen, but I'd also just encourage, since we're going to record this, just hear that. And Ike, do you tell us if you want us to interject and ask questions, or if you want questions at the end, but take it over, brother, and we'll just hear some wisdom.
Absolutely. Do me a favor, man. Grab a $1 bill, $5 bill, $20 bill, any kind of bill that you have.
How about me? I'm a bill.
There you go. Grab a bill.
And now you said any kind of bill. I don't need to have one of each of those, do I?
No. Just any bill whatsoever.
All my money's out in the car at the moment. So
okay. On the back of the $1 bill that you have, $5, $20 bill, what does it say somewhere right below where it says the United States of America?
In God we trust.
Are you serious? Are you sure you don't have fake currency? Is that the real deal there? Guys, it's been said that we serve a God who's the same yesterday, the same today, and the same forevermore.
Amen.
Amen.
But what if the God that we've come to know from our past doesn't show up the way we expect him to in our present, which then causes him to seem absent from our future? What do we do then? Hopefully, as Bill aptly titled today's message, what we should do, what we should say, what we should believe and live into the truth is exactly what that $1 bill says in the back, which is the fact that in God we trust.
Yeah.
Not the $1 bill,
No.
not the man who's our employer, not our preferred choice for who should be president of this country, but in God we trust. You see, it doesn't matter if you're called to the mountain of business and economy. It doesn't matter if you're called to the mountain of government, the mountain of the church, family, education, arts and entertainment, even media. At some point in our life, we are all going to have to confront this dilemma. We're going to have to confront our response to the God of our past not showing up as we expect in our present. As a result of those sequence of events, it feeling like God is seemingly absent from what our future is supposed to look like. So the right response to the dilemma is to say, in God we trust. Oh, it sounds so spiritual, doesn't it? I mean, you just feel good uttering those words. It sounds like we graduated from Liberty University. We just got our seminary degree, right? It sounds like we have arrived in the spiritual utopian world that we live in. But is that what we always do? Certainly wasn't the case for Abraham, who, interestingly enough, is the only one in the Bible who's referred to as the father of faith. I find it interesting that when we look at Abraham's life, what he did. Abraham, like you, like myself, like a lot of people who are believers in Christ, he received a strong prophetic word from the Lord at the age of 75. And part of that prophetic word was that his seed would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. And more importantly, was that he would indeed have a son that would come from his own loins. How many of us in here have promises that are strong, that God has declared over our lives as to what we could imagine our future to look like? Well, 11 years later, we see Abraham, the father of faith, engage in what I would call some self-talk. That sounds a lot like what the serpent said to Eve when he said, "Did God really say?" How many of us have looked at the prophetic words over our lives and said, "Did God really say to go to Minneapolis, Bill, and go check out this revival?" Did God really say? And you can fill in the blank. See, I wonder what sweet nothings the voice of the inner critic, the voice of our enemy, has been saying to us. What is your "did God really say" moment that you're wrestling with right now? I wonder how that thought, how that question is playing out in your life. You see, this isn't supposed to be a message of doom and gloom, even though it might sound like it's starting out. It's really a message of hope. Because here's what I know to be true. If the only one in the Bible, Abraham, who's called the father of faith, could absolutely miss it by his own act of volition to step in where he felt like God was a man that he should lie. If he could make that kind of a mistake in his faith walk and still be considered the father of faith, oh goodness. And I think that there is a lot of hope for you, for me, as we stumble
Amen.
through the realization, the manifestation of our individual prophetic words over our lives. Here's another encouraging example. Ever heard of a boy by the name of David? One of the most famous pizza delivery boys ever to exist. David was also a liar, an adulterer, and a murderer. Now think about that. A liar, an adulterer, and a murderer. Yet this same man who committed what some would seemingly consider to be unpardonable sins is the only one. The only one. Think about Peter and Paul and all of the great men in the Bible. David is the only one that God refers to as a man after my own heart. So where have you missed it in your walk with the Lord? What have you allowed the enemy to use as reason to condemn you? That you're not his biggest, brightest, most significant investment that he will undoubtedly get a return of investment from. Here's another one that should encourage you. You guys remember that evening when Jesus confronted Peter with a word of knowledge? He told his closest confidants with whom he was having his Last Supper, this very night, one of you would betray me. What did we hear Peter say? Oh, Father, Jesus, no, that can't happen. I mean, even if all of them fall away, Lord, I will never deny you, Lord. Not me. Yet Jesus said, this very night, before the rooster crows, not once, not twice, 3 times, you will deny me. Think about that. The greatest act of betrayal ever to take place in the Bible. The same person who did that is the same one whom several chapters later we read that the very foundation of the church is being built upon. So again, I say, what is your story that's causing you to question whether or not the very prophetic words that you've heard about what your future is supposed to look like aren't going to come to pass? You see, I share the stories of Abraham, David, and Peter as a source of hope for you to recognize that no matter how much you've completely screwed up your faith walk, that there is hope and that your latter years can in fact and will in fact be so much greater than your former. I share those stories also as a bit of a backdrop to a recent poll that I ran here recently on social media, where I asked this question about our perspective on our past. And this is where I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation, because I'm going to give you the question, I'm going to give you what some of the choices are, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. And so when you look at your past, you look at the years that you've walked the face of this earth, you look at all that has transpired, what do you see? What do you see when you look at your past? Here's 4 choices. Do you see wisdom and insights? Choice number 1. Do you see a picture of the future? Choice number 2. Or do you see missed opportunities? Choice number 3. The 4th choice would be something else, but let's just stick with those 3 choices. Which one of those 3 bubble up for you? Wisdom and insights, a picture of the future, or do you see missed opportunities? Bill says 1, wisdom and insights. You can type in the chat to share what you see when you look at your past and what you've been able to walk through. Wisdom and insights would be 1. A picture of the future would be 2. Missed opportunities would be 3. I thought it was a rather interesting poll that I took. And when the results came back in, 8% of the people who were surveyed said they saw a picture of the future. 42.8% saw missed opportunities. 43.2% saw wisdom and insights. And about 6% all saw different things, other comments. I think it's important to recognize how our past can frame our present and ultimately determine what we see in the future. Now, here's a lot of you who may not know me. Here's what I see when I look at my past, which will serve as a bit of an introduction to those of you who don't know me. I go back to my not too distant past when I officially became an adult. 1996, I graduated college with a bachelor's degree in accounting. Exactly 2 years from the date, 1998, I become licensed as a certified public accountant. By the year 2000, I've graduated from Georgia State with my master's degree in personal financial planning. That same year, I became licensed as a certified financial planner. From 1996 to right about 2001, I probably made 3 to 4 to 5 times in income outside of the work that I did for an employer that I did working for an employer. So I was blessed and fortunate enough to have accumulated a little bit of wealth outside of my employment. Then 2001 hit. And we all know what happened in 2001, right? We had the tech bubble. Prior to 2001, all you had to do was throw a dart on the board and buy, one of those tech companies, and you'd wake up the next morning and they were up like 20%, right? End of the week, that's doubled in value. Crazy time. But that all came to a screeching halt in the year 2001. It's also the year that we now mark as a 9/11. We don't even have to include the last letters of the year. So I lost a ton of wealth with the market crash. I also, for the first time in my career, experienced unemployment. And it didn't last 1 month or 2 months, or 6 months. It lasted 18 months. Now, here's what's interesting about that. If you're of the betting kind and you were going to bet on somebody who was fully qualified to quickly regain employment, all you had to do was look at my resume. I'd worked for 2 of the big 6 accounting firms, master's degree, graduated top of my class, multiple licenses, always promoted. I mean, if anybody was a safe bet to get reemployed, it was this guy right here. What I know to be true is God has marked out the dates and the times and the seasons, and you can't screw that up. He will do whatever is necessary to fulfill the part of the chapter of your life that needs to be fulfilled in the season that it needs to be fulfilled. And so back then, the next chapter of my life was supposed to start off as an entrepreneur. God knew how stubborn I was, that he made it clear that even if I tried to pay somebody to hire me, that it wasn't going to happen. I had literally every door shut to gain an employment. And that led me into entrepreneurship. I call myself a forced entrepreneur. I didn't become an entrepreneur because I just had this great idea. I'd always sold cookies and I just knew this was part of me. No, I got forced into entrepreneurship. And so 2001, I lose my job, market crash, I'm unemployed, real estate portfolio goes south. I had about a dozen properties that all blew up from several foreclosures. So I filed bankruptcy, I ended up filing bankruptcy. But in July 2002, after going 18 months without finding a job, I lucked up and got hired as an independent contractor. And I started traveling the country, meeting with small business owners to do consulting work for them, financial coaching, consulting, etc. My wife was petrified because, for those of you who don't know, I am as geographically challenged as anything you can find. We laugh about it. The only way that I survived was thankfully because of MapQuest. I kid you not. When I would go on assignments back then, I'd have a MapQuest printout that says, Ike, here's how you get from the airport to your hotel. Here's how you get from the hotel to the client's business. Here's how you get from the client's business back to the airport. Do not deviate from any of these 3 pages because otherwise you're going to be lost. That was my story. I should have bought stock in MapQuest because they kept me alive those years. But I started consulting and filed for bankruptcy in 2003, but also incorporated my first company and was traveling all of the United States doing some incredible work, helping small business owners. In that period of time from 2003 So right about 2008, I was blessed and fortunate to see my income 10x from what it used to be when I was an employee. I had always heard coaches and consultants talk about this whole idea of, you being able to 10x your income. To be perfectly honest with you, I thought it was just great marketing copy to get me to sign up for their coaching programs. But the God honest truth is I never experienced that until I became an entrepreneur. So if you're making notes, make this note. The fullest expression of everything that God has in you that will materialize in a financial perspective, it's my personal belief that will only occur when you choose to be like the one who created you. And you learn to give full expression to the creativity that he's placed in you as an entrepreneur, not as an employee. As an employee, you're always going to get stifled. You're always going to be building somebody else's dream. You're never going to have the full breadth, depth, and length to be able to give expression to all that God has deposited in you until you make that bold leap to become an entrepreneur. Okay. So income 10x's during that stretch. By 2008, I've accumulated a 7-figure net worth. I've got 6 figures in passive income. I go into semi-retirement. That only lasted a few months, not quite a full year. In 2009, I unretired and started building a financial services practice. Things were going well. 2012, I decided to write a book called Winning the Money Game, separating the truths, the myths from the truth, everything you don't know about achieving financial independence. Why? Because I knew the journey that I took from being bankrupt to being financially independent from 2003 to 2008 was a very unique one. I accomplished at the age of 34 what in our industry we try to help people get to by the age of 65. And I knew that that was no small feat. And I knew that I'd done some things a little differently and I wanted to share that with the world. So I released the book, did well, became an Amazon best-selling book. Ended up with a ton of PR. I got to blog for the Huffington Post, ended up on Fox and a bunch of other networks. Life was good. I'm like at the top of the mountain. You can't tell this boy nothing, right? Then 2014 rolls around. In that year, I suffered 2 devastating business betrayals, cost me 7 figures plus, losses in wealth. And to make matters worse, one of the betrayals was sort of a classic Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme. So I'm an investment advisor at this point, and after about 4 or 5 years of working with a manager that I was working with, he decides to go rogue and he starts misappropriating people's funds. When all hell breaks loose and the SEC comes in, he decides to fly the coop. He disappears. He's nowhere to be found. So guess who's left holding the bag? SEC decides that, hey, we don't have any other folks out in Hollywood who would be impacted by this. It's not a $50 billion case. So guess what we're going to do? Rather than expend resources to go try to track down the perpetrator, we're just going to rewrite history. And we'll hold Ike responsible for his losses and his clients' losses. I kicked off a 2-year legal battle of me respectfully trying to get the SEC to reconsider their opinion about how somebody who lost hundreds of thousands of dollars of his own money could have anything remotely close to being responsible for what took place. By 2018, I ended up settling my case with the SEC on a neither admit nor deny basis, had my CFP license suspended, my investment advisory license suspended with the right to reapply in 2023. But at this point, my financial assets were depleted. My income was below poverty line. And to be perfectly honest, it was a pretty sad state of affairs. I went into a mini depression, to be perfectly honest with you. By the first half of 2019, I was literally on the verge of bankruptcy for the 2nd time in my short life. And my mental health had, quite frankly, deteriorated. However, by God's grace, through lots of investments with the right community, coaches, mentors, being a part of the CTL group, having you guys remind me of all the prophetic words that God had spoken over my life time and time and time again, even though I wasn't seeing the fruit of that, that carried me through that season. And during the second half of 2019, I resurrected my coaching consulting business, got it to about the level of a six-figure business. In 2020, we did multiple six figures. 2021, we'll see what the Lord has for us by the end of the year. That's a quick picture of my past unto my present. I asked you guys early on, when you look at your past, what do you see? Wisdom and insights, missed opportunities. What is it that you see? The real answer should be all of the above. You should see all of that in there. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to let your perception of what your past has looked like cloud what the future is supposed to be. So in 2021, I launched what's called the Righteous Billionaire Movement. And here's what I see in the future. By the year 2026, I'll be financially independent. I'll be a billionaire. I'll have 7 figures plus in passive income. And between the years of 2026 to about 2030, myself and about 9,999 other righteous billionaires will use our leadership capital as well as our financial capital to make purpose-driven and legacy impacting changes to the nations and communities around us as world changes. See, just as has been said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What we see when we look at our past, it's really up to us. Whether that's beauty or whether that's ashes, whether it's missed opportunities or whether it's divine destinies, it's up to us. So here's the bottom line of what I wanted to share with you guys here today is this. Here's the number one mistake that you don't want to make in life. Never, ever draw a conclusion or a summary about what it is that you can be, do, or have in this life based on the experiences that you've had instead of the potential that you carry. If you were in church, I would tell you to look at somebody next to you, look at somebody in the screen and just yell out to them with all the conviction you have. You got potential, kid. Look at yourself and tell yourself, I've got potential, kid. Lots and lots of potential. Here's why I know this to be true. The beauty about a seed is that a seed carries infinite potential. A seed of corn has the potential of multiple bushels of corn at harvest time. But before that seed can ever reach its potential, guess what has to happen? That seed must die. It must be buried in the dirt. Let me tell you, the dirt, it's not a fun place to be. I mean, it's dirty, it's slimy, you got worms moving all around in there, it's uncomfortable, it's dark, it's scary. You guys know that feeling when you walk into your house and it's dark and it's like, oh my God, you're just reaching for the lights? Yeah, try living that day in and day out. That's what the dirt looks and feels like. So you see me prophetically declare what my future will be in 2026 and what will happen by the year 2030. Perhaps you see a little bit of shine today, right? Even though I'm not yet at my full potential. That's all well and good. But what you don't see is the time that I have spent in the dirt, in the fire, in the places of extreme discomfort, in really, really dark places where, to be perfectly honest with you, there are times when I uttered this out of my mouth. Death is a whole lot more attractive than life itself. For me to realize my potential, for me to raise and lead an army of 10,000 righteous billionaires, I had to be willing to live in the dirt for the past 7 years. Some of you who've known me, Bill, you've kind of walked with me through this journey. But even with as close as Bill and I have been, how much of my journey does he really, really know? Because let's be honest with it. Unless you've walked every day in my shoes for the past 7 years, since my world got turned upside down in 2014, can you even really fathom what it's been like to be in the dirt? Because whether it's at CTL or anywhere else, all you're going to get are the highlights. You're going to get my interpretation from the place of wisdom of what I'm dealing with. Sometimes you're going to get me bawling and wailing because I'm just fed up. But even that is just a glimpse of an hour or 30 minutes in the day of 7 years of walking in the dirt. The road that I have traveled to get to where I am today, which is nothing compared to where I'll be in a few years, it's the same road that you have to be willing to travel if you want God to realize the full breadth, depth, and potential that He's placed within you. I'm concluding, for those of you who've heard me mention the word righteous billionaire movement and are wondering what in the heck is that all about, I'd recommend that you consider joining that movement if and only if you resonate with any of the top 10 reasons that I find people are interested in joining. So I'm going to share those 10 reasons with you and then we'll conclude. Perhaps you have an interest in shrinking your financial independence timeline down from what normally is 30 years to maybe as little as 2 years. That would be one reason. Perhaps you're interested in finding a solution to what I consider to be the inept leadership that we find in our nation, and quite frankly, in most nations today. Second reason. Maybe you're interested in being the solution to that inept leadership by raising your leadership lid, circa the teachings of John Maxwell and other great thought leaders of our time. That would be a third reason. A fourth one would be maybe you're not just interested in retiring early, but really being refired about your purpose to change the world. Reason number 4. Number 5, perhaps you've come to a realization that it's time to awaken from the drunken stupor of mediocrity and start making moves in this life that, quite frankly, are simply extraordinary. Sixth reason, perhaps you're interested in leveraging the secrets of top-tier financial institutions and family offices to manifest wealth safely and quickly so you can enjoy 6 and even 7-figure streams of passive income. Reason number 7 is perhaps you want to create a legacy of positive changes in your nation and in your community. 8, you value the idea of identifying, clarifying, and magnifying your purpose. 9, you're interested in raising your leadership capital and becoming a next generation leader who changes the world and brings an end to most of the wickedness and evil that we see that's present today. And then the last reason is that you'd like to become a billionaire by the year 2030 and use both your financial and leadership capital to reinstitute righteousness at the foundation of all nations. Those are the top 10 reasons that I see people gravitate to wanting to learn more and partner in this movement. If it's of interest to you, I will share links in the chat room so you can get more details about the movement, as well as a free masterclass on living your life on fire, financially independent, and retired early, but more importantly, refied early. I can share both of those in the chat, and then we can open up for some Q&A around all that I've shared. Thank you guys for your time and attention.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. By the way, when you share it in the chat, at the end of this, usually in the end of these sessions, by the end of the week, I'll send out an email and that's where you can respond to them. And of course, some other people in the council table, and I'd encourage you to, on the Facebook website that you helped create, definitely post it there too. That'd be great. So questions, thoughts, answers, feedback. I noticed Deborah Marr is on, and she said that I'm familiar with my own patch of dirt, she says.
Ain't that the truth, right?
Yeah, not sure about what yours is like, but if it's anything like mine goes 20 years, Ike.
Wow.
Maybe I'm a slower learner.
What's funny about the process that we go through is I remember early on, part of what saved me going through my pit experience was attending a Joseph Calling conference that Oz Hillman put on, and just the whole way that God turned me on to Oz and learning about his material and getting to, be in a small group with him for years. But some of the prophetic words that I received during that season, some of them came from that conference and just gave me a reason to have hope. What I thought about how those words were going to come to pass isn't necessarily the way that they're coming to pass. But what I also remembered was us delineating the 7-year period. And I was like, man, 7 years, that's a long time. But I kid you not, right to the very day, I look back and see how God was waiting for his Kairos time. April of this year is my 7-year mark. So I'm starting my 8th year. Everything Oz talks about in his books, the connections, the preparing you, just literally, it's like I've been living that step by step by step to get to this place. So it's uncanny. I mean, obviously we know numerology, we know the significance of the number 7, we know the significance of the number 8. 20, still not sure about that yet, Deb. So.
Well, when I think about it, it's really 3 different 7-year.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Each time I've been taken to a deeper level of surrender.
Yes.
The surrender is the key to getting out of jail.
That is so profound. And one of the biggest things that was such a stumbling block for me, we were on the verge of buying our dream home before the crap hit the fan in 2014. And as everything is unfolding, I'm like, oh, things are going to get back to normal. I'll be back where I needed to be. So for a year and a half or 2 after 2014, my high would come from looking at houses that we were going to buy to get into our dream home. And that's what would keep me going. It finally got to the point where I stopped looking and just completely surrendered that and everything else that I had dreamed about. And what I've come to find out is the time when a lot of the stuff that we're believing God to manifest will manifest is when, for all the selfish reasons, it doesn't matter anymore. When you don't want the thing that you think you absolutely need to give you life, and you realize that you have life itself and life more abundantly in him, that's when he can add all those other things. Back at Matthew 6, again, seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness. We always forget that part, right? I'm in kingdom, but I'm gonna live like a Ooh, I was about to say a word here. I'm gonna live like a alien and God's gonna bless me, right? Nah, you gotta seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and everything else gets added.
Yep.
Questions, thoughts, comments? Looking around the screen here. Liberty, I see you're in from Canada. You know, Ike, one of the things, as I mentioned earlier on, that I still feel like I'm in elementary school. I do want to get to graduate school before I pass and go on to heaven, because I know in heaven we don't have to worry about money. But you know, the interesting thing when I look at when people, it seems like there's two different camps. There's probably multiple camps as you see it, of people, how they treat money. Some people, you know, like in the parables, Jesus seemed to give, you know, the one talent, the 2 talents, the 5 talents, or whatever you want to call them. And then the one with the 1, which I don't want to be. I often find that I do worry. I go, oh my gosh, am I spending my money right? And so forth. So I know I have a poverty mindset. But how do you help people get to a place where they can move to the future and say, you know, Lord, how do I, you know, for you, it's a billionaire. Some people might say, well, you know, I'm content to be a millionaire. Some people may have other versions. But how did you move from the past to the future when you've had bankruptcies and so forth, knowing that it's not your own will pushing forward, but you knew God was leading you to do the billionaire thing? Does that make sense?
No, it's a great question. It's a really pretty interesting story, because those of you who know my story, I've made and lost 7 figures twice. I've had prophetic words over my life about wealth and money for decades, to the point where I got tired of hearing people talk to me about wealth. I'm like, can you tell me about anything else in my future? So it's always been on par for the course. What I haven't known is the reason why. So here I am, these past 7 years, I'm walking through my journey, trying to figure out how I get to the other side, what that looks like, etc., doing everything that I know to do, still trusting God. And then just here recently, past few months, Emma kept on coming back to me, just sharing a lot of stuff that's going on that, quite frankly, for the average American, that just flies over the top of their head. Whether it's this COVID, whether it's the vaccine, the source of the vaccine, why our government is so interested in incentivizing us to get the vaccine. And more importantly, when we follow the money, whether it's Black Lives Movement, whether it's this vaccine, you guys think Bill Gates is vaccinating Africa because he just loves Africa and wants to have that as part of his legacy. No, no, no. He's going into an impoverished country where he can inflict control because they don't have the resources to test out all of the stuff that he wants to do as part of this population control, sustainability movement, 2030 agenda, stuff that's happening behind the scenes, that's driving everything that you see that's happening right now. Trust me when I tell you this, there is nothing that's happening right now that isn't intentional on the part of the government, and not even the government, the billionaires that have bought the government. And so when Emma kept coming to me with all this stuff, and she's just so full of passion with this stuff, and I'm, it's late in the evening, I've been up early, and we're having conversations, and she wants to go at this like 3 hours, and I'm like, I got to get up early, I don't have the energy. But I sense the passion. So I kept telling her, I'm like, you're so passionate about this. You really need to seek the Lord to try to figure out, why does he keep showing you all this stuff? Because again, this isn't stuff that the average Joe is paying any attention to. We're just like, if somebody compliments you and says you're like sheep, that's not a compliment. That means you're as dumb as a rock. And for most of us, we're like as dumb as a rock in terms of buying into the agenda that's being shoved down our throats as to what's happening. And so we're just going out there doing whatever they say, oh, it's a great thing, yada, 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 and not doing any independent study to see what's really taking place. We've had so many instances of people who've died from the vaccine. There's studies that show that people who are not vaccinated are actually healthier. I mean, so there's all of this stuff that's not showing up in the news. So I kept going, hey, find out why the Lord keeps showing you all this stuff, because I wouldn't have found out about any of this stuff on my own. And I kept asking, I kept asking, I kept asking. And as things are unfolding in my life and all the stuff that I'm working on, I wake up one morning, God always seems to like wake me up and, just have me in tears. I wake up in tears, and finally it hits me. He goes, idiot, why do you think I've put you through what you've been through? Why do you think I have you getting ready to do what you're doing right now? The billionaires are the ones who control the agenda across all 7 mountains. So yes, the church can talk about the 7 mountain prophecy and 7 spheres of our culture, and we can talk about change and wanting to raise up leaders and all that other stuff. But where we don't have financial capital, we will have no influence. So the real secret to advancing the kingdom, from my perspective, is not only raising righteous leaders who know how to steward the gift of leadership the way it needs to be stewarded, but also those who have the financial wherewithal. I look at my pillow guy and I cry out and I go, God, why don't we have 1,000 people like him that are willing to sacrifice it all because they know that there's so much more at stake here than the billions that they've made. And they're willing to risk it all because they know that the investment that they're making isn't where moth and Roth is going to steal. And it's an eternal investment. So that's why my big wine right now is to raise up an army of 10,000 billionaire leaders who are going to thwart the agenda of 2030. That's why we have that as a goal. And all of the things that I've been blessed with, all the ways that I know to accelerate capital and make money grow. You're going to see this in social media. You're going to see this when I talk a lot. Wealth, it's more tragic to have wealth and not know why than to face death and not have life. That was my story. 2 times that I got a taste of what wealth was like, I was completely clueless as to why God wanted me to steward that wealth. And so I kept on chasing after other things that had nothing to do with the spirit and the eternal. And so I would self-sabotage. Now, after 7 years, it's like he's been every experience that I have had, whether it's been aligning myself with John Maxwell and going through leadership training there, whether it's all the stuff that I've done through my background in finances and investments, whether it's all the stuff that I've done through in helping small businesses with coaching them on how to grow, all of those things are like the pillars of this movement. You heard me say it early on, the fullness of what you've been called to do, my personal opinion, it's not going to happen when you just have a job. You're going to have to step into some form of a creative endeavor to experience the increase, the abundance that you have a divine right to. For me, I think it's squarely entrepreneurship. So we have a program to help people with that. We got a leadership track to help people with that. We have the wealth creation track to help people with that, all with the goal of helping you to realize your reason for being and the role that you play in really advancing God's kingdom. Because we can talk about it, but until we can be about it, because we got the finances and we can repurchase, reinstitute, get new people who control media, who control arts and entertainment. I get sick and tired of taking my Facebook, and I can't even look at Facebook without seeing somebody being sexualized. Just yesterday, I saw something on the stories where they had the governor of New York, who's now a female. This might have been some bait or something crazy, but they're like, hey, here's a OnlyFans account of her. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't true, but how many more stories like that where we see people in prominent places of leadership who their personal lives don't reflect the level of stewardship for that position that they should have? So these are the things that aggravate me, that pain me, that cause me to lose sleep, that I want to change. So I've been exposed to 7 mountains. I've wanted to be a part of it. I've wanted to figure out what my role in it is. And finally, we talk a lot about purpose, and I think we have some inclination as to what that is, but I think your purpose finds you as well, because that's what happened through my conversations with Emma about, like, why are you so passionate about this? Why is God showing you all this stuff? Go seek him and figure it out. No, you're the head of the household. I'm gonna tell you why. Right? And boom, here I am. So great question, Bill.
Anybody else got a question, thought, feedback? Natalie, you there? At least let me see your face. Come on, girl. She's moved up to Canada, by the way, for those that know her.
Liberty in Canada.
Yeah.
The sounds of that.
Okay, well, we can close it out and I will stop the music here, the recording.